everyone. I'm Fara Palumbo, Chief People Officer at Blue Cross North Carolina. I'm always proud to represent Blue Cross at public events, but today is particularly meaningful to me and to our company. In my professional role, the first priority is to attract and retain the most talented employees. To do that, we must create a work culture and environment that accounts for the competing priorities between one's work and home. Our company stresses the importance of establishing appropriate work-life flexibility so that our employees are in a position to do their best. And beyond the business objectives behind these kinds of policies, being family-friendly is one important way we can help improve the health and well-being of North Carolinians. You may know that we recently welcomed a new president and CEO, Dr. Patrick Conway. We were lucky to draw Patrick from his role as the Chief Medical Officer and Deputy Administrator for Innovation and Quality at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid in Washington, D.C. In addition to leading our company, Patrick is a practicing physician and father to 4 young children. So he not only understands the importance of family-friendly work policies, as a business leader, he also knows how vital those policies are for families such as his own. Patrick has made it a priority for our company to continue to serve as an example, not only to other Blues around the country, but also to the business community here in North Carolina. To help promote family-friendly work policies across our state, today I am honored to share that we're collaborating with the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation on a new initiative called Family Forward NC. Family Forward NC is a business initiative designed to increase access to family-friendly work practices that can help improve children's health and well-being and ensure that our state's business climate continues to be competitive. So at this time, I'd like to ask North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation Executive Director Tracy Zimmerman to come up to the stage to tell you a little bit more about Family Forward NC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fara. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here today to officially launch Family Forward NC. I want to thank Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina for their tremendous leadership in this area, their support, and their partnership. It's been a true privilege to work with all of you. So during our time together this afternoon, we're going to do a few things. We're going to talk about this initiative. We're going to share a little bit about what is the research behind this, why is it good for children, why is it good for business, and we're going to actually see new research that we've done in partnership with Blue Cross with businesses across North Carolina. So we're going to learn a little bit more about what's happening in our state, what our business is doing, what are some of their motivations, and then we're actually going to do a little table work together. So you're going to actually help us launch Family Forward NC together. So as Fara said, Family Forward NC is a business-led initiative. So what we're working to do is increase access to family-friendly workplaces by working with businesses for the coming year to help us identify what are some of the best things that we can be doing for young children and what are some of the obstacles that we need to overcome in order for businesses to support a wide range of issues. And that's one of the things that I want to make note of. There's 2 things I'd say are sort of a hallmark of Family Forward NC. One is that we really are going to listen, learn, and engage from small, medium, and large employers across the state. We're not here to say, this is what has to be done. We're here to say, let's talk together about what are the range of things that can be done that you can best support within your business. The other thing that's a hallmark is that we're really looking at what are the research-based policies and practices. We have evidence now of what are things businesses can do that actually improve outcomes for young children and business. So we're starting from a research perspective. And this may be one of my favorite things about Family Forward NC is it's business smart, family friendly, and future ready. And so while you may not be able to hit, the trifecta, if you go to the racetrack, we've hit the trifecta with this one. And so I'm going to spend the next few minutes telling you why Family Forward NC meets all of these things. So first, okay, if you've been here, who's been here since 8 o'clock this morning? Yes. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you've heard this, right? That we have a tremendous skills gap in our state, that by 2020 it's estimated that 67% of jobs will require some amount of post-secondary education. We already know, if you talk to any employer in this room, I promise you they'll tell you that they've had positions open that they can't fill. So this is something that our state is already facing and is likely only to grow. And the challenge is that a majority of our children are not meeting a critical predictor for academic and higher education success. Anybody know what that is? High school graduation, yes. And what is it that our children aren't, as a milestone, that we know would help predict that? Third grade reading, yeah. So you've heard these numbers today. So 38% of North Carolina fourth graders scored at or above proficient in reading. Only 38%. And it's not surprising then, by the time that they're in high school, only 34% are meeting the ACT college readiness in reading. So we have a skills gap, and we clearly have a reading gap, and we know that those things are connected. So I love this quote, and it'll all come together in a minute. American business depends on a strong workforce now and in the future to compete and succeed globally. But America is facing an unprecedented workforce crisis, a large and growing shortage of skilled workers. One root of this problem is that we've underestimated the importance of the earliest years in life. Who do you think said this? Somebody said military, so you've been paying attention. It wasn't the military, but you're on the right track. It was the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, right? So we have business groups that are already fully understanding that these early years are incredibly important. And so I want to ground you in a little bit as to the why of that. So literally 2-minute crash course in brain science as to why we're paying attention to these earliest years. So child development, not predetermined, interactive, something that is shaped by children's earliest experiences, right? So if folks heard this before, we know that the earliest years are literally shaping young children's brains. And so what I want you to learn today, the one concept, if you remember nothing else, is that brains are built and not born. And this is going to tie back into, I promise, connected to our family-friendly workplaces. And so children's earliest experiences are literally shaping their brain architecture. So every experience a baby has is forming a stronger connection in their brain. The more a connection gets used, the stronger it gets. Ones that are not used so frequently actually wind up getting pruned. So there we go, every connection. And what's amazing about this is if I had given this presentation to you, 3 months ago, I would have said 700 connections are formed a second. But brain science has now found over 1 million are formed per second in a baby. So a lot is happening there. And not all of them will last. And so it's really through having these strong early childhood experiences that we create the foundation for learning and for future academic success. And so this is one of my favorite graphs, although I find it a little frightening. A moment ago, I said that connections peak very early on in age. They're building up, right? The more experience, when I say goo and the baby says ga, and we go back and forth, those connections are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And at some point, they prune. Well, you can see here in this chart that early on for sensory and pathways, that yellow one, those connections before they start pruning are peaking at just a few months. Same with language, it peaks at less than a year, and higher cognitive function at a year, which is one of the reasons why folks are talking about these early years being so critical and connected to what happens as children grow up. So that was why we're talking about future ready. Workplaces that support parents have a direct impact on their children's health, well-being, and future academic and career achievement. And the great thing is that all of these benefits come back to business by building that strong future workforce. Okay, so that's future ready. So why do we say family friendly? And also, what's the urgency in the family friendly part of this? Well, family-friendly workplaces make business competitive in hiring and retaining qualified workers, which is especially relevant today. You can see that a quarter of our workforce of North Carolinians are aged 25 to 44, which is prime childbearing and working years. And not only that, they prioritize this. So 83% of millennials would leave their jobs in favor of those with more family care benefits. Not only that, look at some of these other statistics from across the country. 41% of working parents say a lack of family support benefits has hurt their work performance. 75% of mothers say they have passed up work opportunities, switched jobs, or quit altogether to tend to their children. And it's not just mothers. 50% of fathers have altered their career plans to tend to their children. So we know that increasingly working parents are clearly considering family-friendly offerings a priority when it comes to choosing or staying in a job. Okay, so now we're on to business smart and why that is urgent. I would make the case that everything I have said has led to being business smart and explaining the urgency of that, but it also has a real economic impact on businesses. $4.4 billion, that is the annual cost to U.S. businesses due to employee absenteeism as a result of child care issues. That's not a small number. And we also know that there's an additional cost for premature babies, as another example, which when you read through the policy benefits of policies, you will see that one of the things when we provide pregnancy accommodations and other types of supports reduces the likelihood of premature birth. There's a difference of $38,000 there. So these have a real monetary impact on business. And one of the things that is important to note is that many of the policies in place today are really based on an outdated model of what a family looks like. So we no longer really have two-parent families where one parent is staying home and working in the home and one parent is working outside the home. In fact, only 6% of today's households meet that description. One of the things we're going to emphasize throughout Family Forward NC is it's not just about paid leave. Paid leave is certainly an important benefit that has tremendous benefit for children and for parents and also for business, but there's more than that. There's flex time. There's workplace accommodations such as lactation support, subsidized childcare, and many other things. And you have in your packet a booklet that outlines some of those along with what are the outcomes for children and business. So business smart, these are some of the things that businesses see when they employ these types of benefits. They see that they're better able to attract and retain talent. They reduce their turnover costs. They increase productivity and employee satisfaction, reduce absenteeism, reduce healthcare costs, improve the bottom line, and increase diversity. I'm going to pause for a moment. Are there any questions on all the things that I've shared so far? Okay, I'm going to keep going. So what is Family Forward NC? It's really business-led change, as we said. It's about working with businesses to look at what are the things that they can do, big and small, to bring in family-friendly workplace policies. And what we're going to do over the next year as our startup year is start with research, which you're going to hear a little bit more about in a moment. We're going to listen, learn, and engage. We will be going across the state to talk with businesses and other employers and employees about what is it that they most value, what is it that motivates them to offer these types of benefits, and what are the obstacles that might be getting in the way, so that when we get to our final product for this year, it's informed by that. We're going to be doing case studies, so we're going to showcase those who are doing amazing things like Blue Cross for their employees, as well as the benefits that they're seeing. In December, we will come out then with a guide that is informed by all of these things about how businesses can begin to actually implement many of the policies that we'll be talking about. And recognition. We will be recognizing those who are doing amazing things with their family-friendly policies through our website and through other means to really raise attention and call attention to what's happening. So that is Family Forward NC. I am going to stop there and move on to our next presenter. So I'd like to introduce Rich Niemand. He's president of the Nieman Collaborative, and he's going to share the results of the research that I talked about, the interviews and polling conducted in North Carolina last fall with employers and employees about family-friendly workplace practices. Rich works at the confluence of politics, policy, and consumerism to market social impact. He's known for his ability to synthesize disparate information into compelling persuasion. Rich develops messages that tap into attitudes, touch shared values, and unite different audiences around common objectives. Some of their clients have included MasterCard Worldwide, America's Essential Hospitals, and as I said to someone earlier, if you understand anything about the Heckman equation, Rich is the man who brought that to you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rich as I pull up his presentation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. As Tracy mentioned, our firm works in early childhood development, economic development, and healthcare. And usually when we go to talk to people, they aren't connected. And today I get to talk to you about the subject that is really connected. The other thing that makes me really happy and what was fascinating to me about this research is that I have owned two businesses. This is my second business, which is really an incarnation of a first. And through that time, we've always been committed to family-friendly policies. And the policies that we've needed to have really changed as the workforce has changed. And so I understand this both from a level of an advocate for this, but also what it requires out of an employee, out of an employer in terms of cost and in terms of flexibility and a whole range of issues that have to happen. My business partner, Sarah Hutchinson, recently had a child and she went off on maternity leave. I barely survived it. The room I wanted for my naps for seniors, which is my new theme, that senior workers need naps, was taken over by what I inappropriately named the nutrition transfer room, which is now a breastfeeding room for women in the office. So let's talk a little bit about the research that we did. And what we wanted to do is to really find out what were the prevailing family-friendly policies in North Carolina, and how were people seeing them. So what we wanted to do is go to a wide range of businesses and see exactly what they were offering, what they hoped to offer, and the value that they thought they got out of it, along with what employees felt were the benefit and the value of doing that. And really the results are fascinating. You'll see here that we talked to a number of employers from hospitality and tourism to manufacturing, construction, wholesale transportation and warehousing, service sector and healthcare, nonprofit, and state and local government. We interviewed about 308. There is a margin of error of 5.6. But you'll see the totals there and the totals on the side. And we talked to people who were basically primary decision makers or people who were in joint decision-making functions. When we took a look at that, it was a 15-minute survey. We also looked at the employee methodology, and again, across those sectors and across the size of companies in North Carolina, and then also the number of employees by gender, employees by age, so that we could get a wide range and see what's happening basically with different employers across the state. And what we found was that employers were at different points of the journey, but they all wanted to make progress. They all wanted to offer more family-friendly policies, whether they were adding to the core practices that they have now of health care and 401k and paid time off, or extending things to breastfeeding or family leave and flex time. So you can see here that those who had more employees were more apt to do more, and those who had more females in the workforce and those in service, government, and nonprofit were industries that were most likely to offer these benefits for the next year. And that was almost half of the employers were thinking about offering more or beginning to offer core benefits. And you'll see here what they're offering, and all this data, which is very hard for you to see now, is up on the website and you can look at it. But the bolded areas are areas of statistical significance, and you can see that what's really leading on what they're thinking about adding are pregnant worker accommodations, flexible hours and schedule, breastfeeding support and accommodations, and then the basics of health insurance, paid leave. And you can see it across the ranges of industries and total employees. But the baseline thing is that people are thinking that if they need to be competitive in North Carolina, they need to offer these benefits. But there's also another issue about this, which is that both employers and employees believe that family-friendly practices help businesses attract and retain talent and keep companies strong. I was really amazed and not amazed by the research to see how business-friendly employees actually were and how employee-friendly the businesses actually were in North Carolina. That there's a link, and there always sort of has been in North Carolina, about if you want to be economically viable, you really have to support the baseline things that families need, such as education and other issues. But it's all directed toward this sort of mutually beneficial economic climate. And we really see that in the research. You'll see here that employers and employees consider retention the greatest advantage of offering family-friendly policies. The employer said these policies help entice a younger, more eager workforce to the company, and employees said keeping employees happy helps them work hard and be productive. And you'll see along retention, there's like total agreement, and you'll see along attracting employees, there's total agreement. And then it seems to like move back and forth between what employees feel is important or what employers feel is important. A higher percentage of employees compared to employers say that a positive workplace and morale and support for employee health and well-being, or allowing family balance and flexibility for family time, are the greatest advantage of offering family-friendly policies. We found throughout that flexibility in work hours and in other things where they weren't docked for pay was really, really important to them. And when we think about our families and our own families and how we have to run from one thing to another and doctor's appointments and juggle those things, it becomes really, really important for families. The majority of employees and employers say that family-friendly policies help retain better employees and improve productivity. And most of them said it well described their organizations. You'll see on the top that it's really important for management to offer these services, and employers are actually way ahead of employees in thinking that's really important. So the employers are very, very enlightened in North Carolina in terms of what family-friendly policies do and why they need them, and the employees tend to lag behind. And that was very interesting to us, and we thought it's maybe because they're very concerned about just having a job or being employed in general, but the unemployment rate is very low here in North Carolina right now. We think it's their overall concern for the health of the companies and the baseline benefits. So to the extent that companies are offering these benefits, they should really express how it helps them retain their profitability. And you'll see in the middle part the great agreement on the idea that offering these benefits are really help with attracting and retaining workforce. There's a little bit of disconnect, but not a lot, on the fact that the employer feels that it's their responsibility to be family friendly, and the employee kind of lags a little bit behind there. So what we see is that businesses see family-friendly practices as being good for employers just as much as they are good for employees. And it really feels like what they're saying is that taking care of human capital creates capital for them. And we know from research that that is the case. We know that it's very, very important that supporting these families creates a more stable workforce. It creates more retention, and it also has a two-generation effect. I was just with Professor James Heckman, who's a Nobel laureate economist, a labor economist. We were just in Mississippi with the governor of Mississippi and some other advocates there. And one of the things he always says is that the family is the greatest generator of skills and abilities in their children, that we have schools and we have other supports around them, but it's really the family and the idea that the family is there, being able to have discussions, being able to get to health events and personal events, having dinner at the table, having simple conversations. That's what creates the future workforce. And that doesn't happen when parents don't have enough time to be with their kids. The majority of employers, particularly large ones, really see these family-friendly policies as having an impact that goes beyond their organization. And employees really feel that these policies and practices really help their own families. They have a very immediate view of what it does for them. African American employees are particularly supportive of these policies. And really, employees who are in larger organizations feel that way as well. Employers and employees, they really agree that their organization has a positive outlook on family-friendly policies. They appreciate it, and that the similarity is really that they both tend to be more positive of their organizations when they offer these benefits. Employees tend to be a little less, just a little bit less positive about it, but employers are very much positive about what they have to offer, and they're very proud of it. So employees, what is this this hesitancy? It's not really a hesitancy, but what is this concern of theirs about family-friendly policies? And what they really want to do is they really want to hold on to their core benefits, and this is a remnant coming out of the previous economy and the economic crash and the recession of before. They really appreciate salaries and traditional benefits, 401k, paid time off, vacation time, and health benefits, but they really do welcome these family-friendly policies. And in fact, they look for them when they go to change jobs and when they go to look for jobs. So what you'll see here is that employees agree that family-friendly policies make the workforce more welcoming, but they're also concerned about other aspects of their jobs. And this is a really fascinating slide in the sense that what you see here is what's important to people meeting what matters. And what we know in research and cultural research is we go out and we ask people what's important to them, and they give us a list of things that are very important. And then when they go to make a decision, their decision-making process is based on what matters at the moment. And what matters happens to be the trade-off in things that they value. So, for example, in early childhood education, you will have people voluntarily say that a highly developmental program that meets a child where they are, that's very personalized, is the program they want for their child, but they don't necessarily choose that program for their child because it may cost too much, or because they have to drive across town and it adds an hour and a half to their total overall commute, and they can't spend time with other kids. So what you're seeing here is that they're all saying, 88% are saying that they welcome these family-friendly policies, but 77% say I'm more concerned about other aspects of employment, such as hourly wage, job duties, promotional opportunities, etc. That doesn't say that they're not into family-friendly policies. It says that they're looking at building their overall career, and these policies fit into their overall career decision. In fact, 51% say they'd switch jobs if another employer offered better family-friendly policies and benefits. And then there is very little disagreement here. Only 35% say that only 35% say that they don't think employers should offer it because they wouldn't use it. There's a lot of people who say, well, I'm not going to use these benefits. I would rather have the money go into something that all the employees can use, which is higher wages or bigger contributions to 401k. About 35% say, well, I would actively seek out and seek another job for these benefits. About only 37% say that they wouldn't take advantage of these benefits. So you can see that they really want them, and it's that something extra in the competitive marketplace. almost everybody has a limited definition of what family-friendly practices are. When, as advocates, we tend to go in and say it's the whole gamut, all the way down to helping parents save for childcare, but other people have other definitions of this, and the focus really on family-friendly policies right now are healthcare, paid time off, and retirement savings, that's seen as the core. And you'll see the top-of-mind awareness here is really centered around that, and you'll also see how employers are so much more enlightened, really, about the range of benefits. And part of this is that we ask people who are experts in benefits, but they can really identify a whole set of benefits. When you look at employees, they really focus on health insurance and paid time off and dental insurance and retirement savings. And then it drops off because they know what they know. And they ask for what other people tell them they can ask for or what is offered to them. In my personal company, we have, if you've ever sat through when you've changed insurance or health insurance or insurance benefits, how little your employees actually know and how they're not really equipped to make a lot of decisions or to see what kinds of decisions you're making for them in the selection of those benefits. Some benefits that are very beneficial to them, they think are not beneficial to them. So people have different definitions, and especially employees, and you really have to educate them in terms of their value to them, to others, and then to the overall company. There is a way to deepen these family-friendly policies and practices, and that's to do it where employees and employers come together in a sense of consensus. And that's really around paid time off and flexible spending, both of which are practices that reach everyone. Throughout this, you see that there are younger employees and there are older employees, and the older employees tend to focus not on the extended family-friendly policies, but really on the core policies. And everyone throughout this really wants policies to benefit everybody. So if it's not a policy that would directly benefit somebody, for example, breastfeeding support does not directly benefit a male in the business, we have to be able to express how that helps the business retain and remain very profitable with the best talent. So both paid time off and flexible scheduling are practices that reach everybody. And you'll see here what's really important to employees. 8 in 10 employees rate flexible hours and schedules as important. And employees are more likely than employers to view all these practices as important. You'll see that most of them are running around the 50% range in here, but look how big flexible work hours are for employees. I think it's small here, but it looks like to be about 85%, and employers are at 54%. What employees are saying is that they really need that flexibility without getting docked for pay. In a lot of the industries that we looked at, this is the industries that are most inclined to do this are service and government and nonprofit, and large corporations that have a lot of women and families and younger employees are willing to do this. It gets harder in construction and manufacturing where you have more set schedules and you don't have that kind of flexibility. But you look at paid maternity leave, employees and employers are fairly close on that. And that's the other place to start. Breastfeeding support and accommodations, they're both really close, and that's a no-brainer. Paid paternity leave for fathers may be a bit much when we're fighting with paid maternity leave, but you can see that it's still very important at 58%, and it's really an indication of where the family is these days with 2 earners and 2 people working and people sharing duties. And then subsidized childcare, you can just see the employees at 55%. It is incredibly expensive. I think it averages on the open market about $13,000 per child per year for early childhood and in many cases, that's the cost of in-state tuition. And there are no student loans for that. So you can't even get a Pell Grant or anything else. So you can see that that is the next wave coming and being able to afford that. In particular, people like things like savings plans and helping to save for that are good. So family leave, childcare, and breastfeeding are attractive to the future workforce, and those are the employees of young families. And they tend to be more stable and stick with companies that support them. So this is the next workforce that's coming in. They're college educated in many cases, and they're looking for a place where they can balance work life and home life. And the companies that can help them do that are the companies that are going to have a competitive edge. So you see here that younger employees and parents of young children and those who hold less tenure are more apt to assign importance to the following family-friendly policies. Look at that whopping 83% there. And then you look at the employee age range of the younger employees and the statistical difference from the rest of the groups there, especially people who have been on jobs for less than 4 years. When I talk to Professor Heckman, he always talks about young families, and while he focuses mostly on disadvantaged families, he said we have to remember that working in middle-class families, the period of least financial liquidity is the period of their highest financial output. They have to save for a house, they have children, they have increased health expenses, and they have lower wages. So to the extent in which these family-friendly policies and practices can benefit that is the extent to which you're really going to attract these employees and keep them here. So when you're going to implement these practices, if you're directing them towards reaching the fewer and the young, you have to make it clear that all employees are benefiting because you're attracting and retaining the best talent. And you're also attracting and retaining these stable, family-oriented and younger employees who are going to help companies grow. So, and it's really important, the researcher who we worked on this with, John DeWitt, has years and years of experience with businesses and commercial marketing. And he said, you know, you have to remember it's really that family. The person who has a family who really is going to put down roots is going to stay in one place and want to be with a company. So employers and employees agree that the cost of practices and need among employees can be common barriers to implementation. And this is really fascinating that they're both concerned about the cost of implementing it, but with employers at 71% and employees at 58%. The idea that employees at 58% are really thinking about how business's profitability says to me that the employees here are very business friendly and they see themselves as part of a team. And businesses have to communicate to that. The interesting thing is that employees also think that businesses don't have the capacity to do this when businesses clearly think that they do. If you look at the second line, lack of support from upper management, only 8% of employers say that that's a problem, where employees view it as 36% it could be a problem. Amount of effort to implement and maintain, employers say it's 6%, and employees are rating it at 11%. So there really has to be some reassurance to employees that this really moves businesses forward. So as businesses compete for attracting and keeping talent, these family-friendly workplaces can really provide a competitive edge. Employers with 500 or more employees and parents of young children are among those most likely to consider the impact of family-friendly policies and practices overall. You can see the numbers here, and they really think it's beneficial, and you can see the numbers with anybody with kids at home. So this really will provide a competitive edge. And right now, more than half of employees are satisfied with their employer's offerings, but nearly 3 in 4 would be more committed to an employer if they were offered more. And if you look down on the right, you can see that, look on the right, it's 45% much more committed. So when you really talk about retaining the best possible talent, that's a good edge in there. And then the much more committed and more likely are those really who are just starting out. Income under 50K, have been on their job for less than 5 years, and it's really that younger family and the younger employee who you can bring into a company and shepherd their career and also provide them the benefits to help them shepherd their families forward. So I'll leave you with that, and Tracy, I'll turn it over to you.
I'm not a podium girl, so I'm going to try to stand over here. Thank you so much, Rich, for sharing the research. It's been really fascinating to learn where we are and where we could go. I hope that one of the things that you've heard is that there are immediate payoffs to providing family-friendly workplaces and long-term benefits. So this is something really exciting as we think about our workforce of today and our workforce of tomorrow. And with that, I'm going to call up onto the stage our panelists. We're very excited to have with us Andrew Herdman, who is the VP of at Maine Pharma in Greenville. We have Fara Palumbo, who is the Chief People Officer. Is that not the best title ever? At Blue Cross. We have Napoleon Wallace, who is the Deputy Secretary from the North Carolina Department of Commerce, and Sepi Saidi, who is the President and CEO of Sepi Engineering and Construction, that has 4 offices in North Carolina and 1 in Colorado. So, like, you get some good vacations, right, to go back and forth. All right, come on up. I'll take the end here. Are we all good?
You changed your mind?
What's
You're not
that?
sitting in the middle?
No,
Okay.
I'm going to sit here.
All right.
This way I can look down at all of you
Great.
and talk to you. So I'm going to start with our business leaders and start with, what was the primary motivation for you or your company in offering work-friendly benefits? We'll get the details a little bit more of what they're offering in a moment, but just sort of speak to the motivations of what that was. Sepi, can we start with you?
Yes, first I want to thank you for inviting me, and I apologize to everybody since you've been here since 8 o'clock in the morning and have to now listen to more. So, and I don't have a good joke. I would have used it, but no, they could. As I was sitting there looking at the research, I was thinking that the bottom line reason that we offer family-friendly policies because we want to create a better world. It is just at the bottom line, and that's all you have to tell people. It's not that, yes, if you have a lactation room, somebody who's not breastfeeding, or if they don't have children, but the way I articulate it, and as a part of our culture, is that our goal is to create a better world. And if you look at last night I was looking at the Super Bowl advertisement, I don't know how many of you paid attention to how they were connecting their product to a better world. So there was a beer, the one that got my attention, I didn't even pay attention good enough, but the beer was connecting to the clean water, right, if you drink. So I think we live in a time that is the most important topic we have to talk about, and that resonates with the millennials who don't have children and with everybody who says, do I want to pay more for foster care, or do I want to pay now to create a better world so we don't have to have more children in trouble, youth in trouble, social services that are affecting us. So, to me, it's a very simple logic, and it makes a lot of business sense.
Thank you. Fara?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I think when we think of our company is very focused on improving health and well-being of people in the state. So when we think of that as our mission, as our core mission, you want to make sure that your workforce is aligned to that. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can improve their health and well-being, and family-friendly benefits, aside from they're the right thing to do, you have to think through what really is the motivation. And it isn't just about childcare and thinking about people that are getting parental leave because they're starting out. You have to think about the full workforce. So that's obviously the first motivation. Wow.
Thank you.
Bringing
Good
down
night.
the house.
I never have turned the lights out.
Exactly.
Here's the joke. Okay. The second thing is clearly we're trying to attract and retain talent. This is a highly competitive environment, and when I think about our organization even 15 years ago and the perception and the brand that you have from an employer standpoint, we are competing with very, very impressive companies. So how do we make sure we're able to continue to compete, attracting and retaining talent? So we're constantly evaluating what is it that we offer to be in that competitive environment.
Great. What about you, Andy?
My story, I think, is a little different. Rich, you were scratching me exactly where I itch with all the data. I'm a former academic and had spent, I guess, about 15 years in HR. This is in the 1990s, and I went back and got my PhD. And the topic I chose, or the kind of the focal research area, and I spent about 12 years doing it, was really isolating the impact. If the employer takes a perspective that the relationship is something beyond simple economic exchange. That there's a reciprocal relationship. You commit to them, and they will commit to you in turn, or offer greater service to your customers, offer greater effort on the job, et cetera, and stick around longer and drive down turnover numbers and all those kind of things. So I spent 12 years of my life really pursuing that question. Could we isolate that in a rigorous empiric way, that relationship? And in fact, it's there. So we know that, or our understanding of that in very pragmatic return on investment terms is coming around and is really developing quite nicely, frankly. So when I came back into industry, I came armed with all this understanding that, hey, listen, it is a moral imperative. We are citizens. We are corporate, we offer corporate citizens in the communities we operate, but it's a happy coincidence because to do the right thing is also to do the most profitable thing over time. And so I entered the workforce or returned to industry with that mindset. And I was very fortunate to land inside of a company that has, and I think every organization kind of has a kind of a guiding ethos, and theirs was very family-centric. So then it became easier to begin to think about, we had kind of a receptive audience and a receptive management team to hear those arguments. And they were only happy to learn that it is, in fact, a profitable thing to do as well. So.
I love how you frame that, the happy coincidence. So we know it's a good thing to do. It's good in terms of making the world a better place, which we're seeing, as you said, a lot of brand marketing around that concept, and that there's a real business outcome that you're seeing at Blue Cross and that you have actually studied and can point out. So I'm going to turn a minute then to you, Napoleon, and say, in supporting employees who are re-entering the workforce, what are you seeing in terms of benefits that they see as critical for their success?
So I start out by saying in addition to doing the work that I do every day with the Department of Commerce, I also am the parent of two young women, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I call them women intentionally because they run our house.
Of course they do.
But my wife and I recently dealt with this sort of issue of how do you return back to the workforce, some of the stresses that it caused, and really the need for having kind of effective as well as effective family-friendly policies in the workplace. I think that one thing that I just want to call out is really mirroring the note that you made earlier that the Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Chamber of Commerce made. When we think about family-friendly policies at Commerce, the way we're really approaching it is from a workforce perspective. I mean, when folks come to the state of North Carolina, when we're attracting folks, we're trying to grow businesses here, folks are trying to grow a business here, and they're talking to us, they want to hear about incentives, infrastructure, taxes, that sort of stuff. But talent really is at the top of the list. And the way that we're looking at this is we do a lot of programming for other groups that are entering the workforce, re-entering the workforce. For the DWS team that I oversee, We have 81 workforce offices across the state, and then 23 workforce development boards that we're working with. And across those groups, we are working with veterans, ex-offenders, youth, all different categories. But this is a category that seems to be left out of the box a little bit. And we see it as being so critical. I mean, you really can't overstate the economic impact that it's able to have. And when we're looking at the type of, labor shortage, I guess you would say, that we're facing right now, having better policies that can enable people to stay in the workforce and to keep them interested in participating in the workforce, we see as critical.
Great. So let's get into the details a little bit then about what types of policies. Can you tell us about what are the family-friendly benefits that you're offering or your companies are offering to employees? And I want to share that as a result of this work, we're making changes as well, and we're a small nonprofit. We have 3 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees, and I'm proud to say we now have 12 weeks of paid maternity and paternity leave, and so we're thrilled about that, and partly inspired by the leadership of folks like you on the panel. So tell us a little bit about what you all are doing.
Sure, I can start.
Go ahead, Fara.
So we were sitting there a few minutes ago looking at Tracy's brochure that's on your table, and I opened it up and I flipped through it and I thought, this is so cool. When you're immersed in it, you don't realize, I know we do some really cool things, but when I opened the book and read pretty much every single thing in that book, we do offer. So we do have 12 weeks paid parental leave, which we instituted last January, so it's just been about a year. We do have an on-site backup child care center, which I think is really one of the most exciting benefits because it really does help many, many people in our organization. So lots of our employees always get excited and come talk to me about, can't we have a full-time child care center? And the answer continues to be, much to their dismay, no, simply because it would be an enormous child care center given how many young families we have. And this really does allow families to be supplemented in the event of their own child care falling through. But if you take that and you go the flip side, the other end of the spectrum, we do have backup elder care as well. Because again, the workforce is not just young families. And we talked a lot about young employees, but there are many, many employees that are dealing with being in the sandwich generation, which is extremely complex and difficult to deal with. So as I tell many of our staff, when you're having babies and you're dealing with the 3-year-olds and the 1-year-old, you think that is the craziest time of your life. And then you find out, no, not so much. It's going to get even much more complicated than that. And I think it's our role to think about the entire workforce. So we have on-site fitness centers, on-site wellness centers. So we are blessed because we have been focusing on this for quite a while. And I would say, like other wonderful CEOs in the area, we have had wonderful leadership that has been very supportive of this. Our former CEO as well as our current CEO, who is, as I said earlier, dealing with a young family. And the really exciting thing was when he joined the company, he said, I want to be home for dinner with my kids. So that's also changing the mindset of leadership in the company. So that's another exciting thing. So I'll let others talk.
Did he say he's going to cook the dinner or he was
Pick it up on the way home.
But I have got many, many texts and emails saying I am on dad duty, and he's got 4 little ones between the ages of 2 and 9. So that is just, he's setting an example for other parents in the company to make that okay, to not necessarily answer that email that isn't a crisis. So I'll let others share.
So when I started my career, I didn't have children, but later on I had children. So throughout my career, I have 2 wonderful kids that I'm very proud of. They're grown, and so I had to balance the 2, and I quite never had that much family-friendly work environments. So when I started my business, I had a lot of flexibility. That was a huge part of being the CEO. When we were very small, I had a lot of flexibility with the kids' schedule when I went and came and picked them up. And so I decided to, we're about over 300 employees, so we're not anything as large as Blue Cross Blue Shield, but we are offering a lot of flexibility. That's a big part of attraction. And I try to always remember what was so important to me as a working mom. Working outside the home mom, because all of moms are working. So it was very important to have the flexibility, the time off. We have a rich time off. When they start, employees start with us, we give them 3 weeks time off, and after 1 year, they get 4 weeks. And after 5 years, they get 5 weeks. So we have a rich paid time off, and then we have the paternity and maternity leave and flexible spending. We don't have the, we have a paying for the gym membership, for the health care. What we need to work on, what I was actually thinking when Fara was talking, is the child care. We don't give money towards child care or offer that right now, but we have everything else in the handbook we offer. And we are always looking to do it better and more creative, and flexibility of if they can work from home or if they need to be in the office, or what are the various ways that we can support them to also give back to their families.
Great. Andy?
I don't really have anything to add in terms of policies, standing policies. I'll offer a couple thoughts. For me, I think the lines blur pretty quickly. So as an example, if you have a young woman working on one of our manufacturing lines who expresses an interest in getting her degree, her associate's degree, our support for that through the tuition reimbursement program, our protection of our health insurance benefits against significant pressure to pass cost on to employees, training and development opportunities. I think there's a whole lot of things that go into caring for the entire employee, which has that impact on the employee. So for us, it's kind of it's a broad exploration at all times in terms of how do we continue to create an environment in which people feel cared for, in which people feel like their well-being is as important as their contribution or the things that they're making or the reports that they're filing that day. But we have the fitness center. We actually have one under construction, and we just literally on January 1st put the maternity and paternity policy into place, which is 12 weeks, and did some other things that formalize it. But I think, and I'd be curious to hear the panelists' reaction here. When you're as big as Blue Cross, right, and you're 300 employees, we're 750 in the U.S. When you're 750, 300, you have some flexibility and you can manage things informally. So if there's a snow day, and Pitt County schools cancel schools, any Pitt County folks in here? Yeah, they cancel school at a forecast over there, and they canceled for 3 days. So we welcome the kids on site. You know what I mean? So we'll show movies. We'll find an office or a conference room that we can kind of all pile them in. But it's a matter of, but that's very informal. And what and this is my question maybe for Blue Cross is, how do you manage that at 10,000 employees or 30,000 employees? I think it becomes a challenge as you grow, and there's increasing pressure to convert these things to a piece of paper that reads the rules and regulations and policies associated with it.
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. There's no doubt about it. But for as long as I've been there, I've actually watched this evolve, because there was a time when the request was, it's snowing, let's bring the kids into a conference room. And when you are 6,000 people, you cannot have children in a conference room for their own safety. I mean, even the take your child to work day became a little overwhelming. But, great example with the snow, with all due respect to the school systems. I see the hand raised in the back. We see the forecast when Greg Fischel says snow is coming. I just, it's like batten down the hatches, how are we going to deal with this? But we've actually evolved to a place where we say, we're not closed. The customer has to be handled, so our call center can now open virtually. So we say to everyone else, stay home. And you have the ability to work from home. So work from home if you can, and if you cannot, then you take a PTO day, use PTO. But that has become much more flexible, because I really do think all of this is about flexibility and seeing the entire person, regardless of what the demographic is, in terms of age and place in life and children or no children and all of that.
Right. And we certainly heard the flexibility come through loud and clear in the research as Rich discussed. I want to pick up on something else you said, Fara, earlier, which was really around sort of the workplace culture. And so it's one thing to offer these types of benefits, and then it's another for people to feel comfortable to actually take advantage of them. And so that seems to me one example of perhaps some of the challenges or bumps that you might encounter as you do this. And because we don't want to just paint a shiny, pretty picture and help folks understand what are some of the other challenges that you might have come across as you were implementing, and you, Seppi, and then for Andy, since you came into this, as you were doing your research, perhaps there are things that you also have come across. Seppi, do you want to start first?
So the question is, again,
Were there any challenges that you encountered in beginning to provide more flexibility or any of the other benefits that you were extending to your employees?
Yes, the challenges that we encountered were what was in the research earlier. The single adults, single young people did not care for a lot of benefits that the company is spending, family-friendly hours, and towards like when we were considering paying more for the family insurance, that became an issue because they were feeling like they are being something that company's profit is going towards a group that has a family and we're single, and why should we be exposed to that? So the main part that we have had challenges has been with folks who don't have children or elderly care or other people that they have to support. So it was hard to get them to understand and empathize. So that's why at the beginning I was talking about building a case for a bigger case for them about the world and about the society and about the community. So it's an ongoing conversation we have to make sure that they are looking at the big picture.
Yeah, I would actually agree. We really do try to speak to all the various components, training and development being one of them. And so there's childcare. We're trying to have conversation about the bigger picture. And it is difficult because depending upon what you are speaking about, someone is not happy about it. So for example, we announced last year, after we did parental leave, towards the end of last year, we announced a scholarship program for employees' families. That should be exciting. But there is some noise about another thing. But again, we always try to have conversation about and open up a dialogue and create a culture where people can say what they want, raise concerns, but ask questions. We have a very open social media platform in the organization. So some days it's harder to deal with than others, but we do have people who will tell us what's on their mind. And we try to address those in a very transparent way, and that allows more open dialogue to occur. And then we take suggestions. So I always have people who will say, well, what about this or that? And then we evaluate within the context of, is this something that will be beneficial to a broad part of the workforce? What's the cost of it? Even the parental leave, there was a cost benefit that had to be done to make sure that that made sense to expand it. So,
thank you. Andy?
I think, and there's a bit of a recurring theme here, that we get some of the older folks, some people that their kids are long gone, maybe they're grandparents now, and they recall, when it was uphill both ways to school through 3 feet of snow, and they didn't get time off, and why should anybody else? So I think, and I think for whatever reason in the United States, and we're an Australian company, so we see what they have over there statutorily in terms of the statutory requirements, and certainly are familiar with what's happening in Europe, which tends to be, a couple decades ahead of us. But for whatever reason in this country, we have this kind of Puritan work ethic thing that you got to have your phone in your pocket. If it buzzes, you got to compulsively look at it and do all these kind of things. So really, one of my more challenging audiences is some of the managers, line managers who have been around a while and seem to resent the younger folks if it does impact them. And I think that's why balance view is so important. But the other thing that we, and I, again, curious for your thoughts, is we got a lot of fear of opportunism on the part of the employees, that we were going to be somehow exploited, that if we gave somebody a leave that they could take in the absence of rigorous documentation around who this and that, they were going to take advantage of us, et cetera, et cetera. And that's simply not the case, and certainly hasn't proven to be the case. It turns out that when you treat people like adults, you get adult behavior. When you treat people like infants and regulate their every action and when they have to be here and when they don't, you get infantile behavior and you're shocked by it. So that's been kind of a curious dynamic, I think, in my experience.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the listening and engaging and open communication is a really key part of beginning to do this kind of work or expanding this kind of work.
And I want to add something to Andy's point about the culture in the United States that's focused on work. We have a group of our employees that have not been able to, sometimes they are not able to take all of their time off. And at some point, we decided to allow them to roll over 80 hours. So the purpose of time off is for people to take the time off. And then it was this major upheaval in 1 year that folks were saying, we want to get paid for all of the time that we're not taking off. So I was telling them, well, we can't encourage that because the purpose of time off is to encourage you to take the time off. So it became a major, actually, sticking point with a lot of our employees that I just said, no, we're not going to pay and we're not going to carry over more, forcing them to take the time off, which should not be a case, you think, for people to force you to take time off.
We actually had a policy in place where they could accrue, spill up to 160 hours, and then once they hit that 160 hours or 4 weeks, anything that they didn't use, we would buy back from them, okay? So if you think about kind of the unintended consequence of that, and it quickly became this, is people were now economically incentivized not to take vacation. So we got there and we looked at it and we said, this is, not only is it expensive, right, but it's the wrong thing. And so we said, listen, if you have 4 weeks vacation or 3 weeks vacation, take it. It's there for a reason. It's there for your own well-being. It's there for your health. Take the vacation. But I don't take the vacation. I'm too busy. Take the vacation.
Yeah.
Figure it out. And so we just had our first full year under that, and it went really, really well. And with some planning, and it does take some planning to get far enough out that supervisors feel comfortable. And but if you open the dialogue, you can figure out a way to get your vacation taken. It turns out. So.
Great.
I have a really funny story to share about that. So we feel exactly the same way, and we have the same policy where you accrue a lot of time, and you can carry over 80 hours, and that's always been the case. So a couple of years ago, there was a really, really big, I want to say it's more than 5 years ago, very, very difficult year. Many, many people were saying, can't take it, and everyone was sending me lists of all these people that we really needed to figure something out. And some of my colleagues are giggling because they know exactly this story. I personally had this brilliant idea that I said, we should just this one time pay out the balance.
Oh.
No, wait, you're
Just
going to
this
be
once.
shocked at what happened. My assistant said to me, bad idea. And I said, but everyone will love it because they always say they want money, they want the money. So we did it. We did it that year and paid it out. I got hate mail about cashing out this PTO because because I've cashed it out all. There was nothing to carry over. I think you could carry over 5 days instead of 10. So many people were upset simply because they got used to having the year begin with the 10 days and then be able to take some more. So essentially what I did without realizing it, and it wasn't when I say I did a team of my team members. We're all, that was the lesson learned, is like, please don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Let's all really have this good dialogue. But there was so much frustration that year that I will never, now they come to me and say, let's cash out. I'm like, no, never doing that again. Bad idea. She's laughing, she knows.
So I'm going to bring it back to Napoleon, who has been very patient. So as you're thinking about our future workforce, what do business leaders really need to know when considering family-friendly practices?
So I'd start by saying that, I think the family forward NC approach of engaging business as the primary sort of leader around this makes a ton of sense. That's part of the answer. But we know that the best workforce strategies, are business-led. We know that the strategies that are best adopted, have the highest, level of success, are all business-led. So to the extent that you all are wrapping, kind of like these initiatives around the needs of business, I think that's great. So I just want to get that out there. From a trends perspective, right now, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, right now we're looking at 3.7% vacancy rate, a little over 4% unemployment. We have a very tight labor market, an extremely tight labor market. Everyone is competing for talent. You talk to economic developers, I recognize a few of them in the room. You talk to economic developers about, what are the priorities, what are the things that are holding you up when you're trying to grow or, you're trying to expand workforce. And their top items, in many cases, folks are going to talk a little bit about housing, like the non-sort of incentive stuff. They're going to talk a little bit about housing. They're going to talk a little bit about, health access and some stuff like that. And then it's going to get back around to childcare always comes up, which I think that's been part of the conversation before, but not as centrally as it is now. I think Governor Cooper's strategy around, the governor's strategy around childcare, potential childcare tax credit could help alleviate some of that. But I just say I think that part of what we want to make sure that the business community knows is that it really is going to require their leadership in moving this forward, and it is very beneficial for them. It sounds like everyone here already gets that, but there are other folks, other business communities, some that we engage with around workforce where they're still trying to figure this out. And so making sure that we have kind of the right resources in place to be able to support them, we think is critically important. And we'd say to them, as folks are thinking about this, they should obviously be thinking about you all as a resource, but we also want to be a resource within DWS, the workforce system, to make sure that we're delivering value to them.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're looking forward to partnering with all of you, and thank you so much for participating today. Although we don't have time for questions right now, each of our panelists has agreed to stick around for a little bit after the session, so you're welcome to engage with them and ask them questions at that time. But I want to thank each of you for being here today.
Thank you.
We are going to move into actually doing some work together. If anyone has been to any event led by the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation, you know that you don't get off scot-free and that we need your excellent thinking in helping us plan as we move ahead. So, at your table, is there a worksheet?
Let's keep the time off. And it was
So what we're going to ask you to do is have a table conversation around what is it, imagining our future, okay? So picture this. Everyone pretend there's that like crazy dream noise that happens, we're imagining. Imagine that it's 2028 and businesses of all sizes are finding ways to create family-friendly workplaces benefiting their company, employees, and their children. Okay, so we're all there, we're in the future, 10 years in the future, it's 2028, it's quite the environment, employees are excited, employers are excited, we're all reaping the benefits. How did we get there? What needed to happen? What questions did we need to answer to help us get to this place that we now are? So I'm going to give you a few moments to have a group conversation around answering that question, and then we're going to take some pop-ups to help inform us as we move forward, because these are the kinds of questions that we also want to be able to answer so that we can provide the best guidance possible and support to the business community. Lisa is handing out a worksheet, so what I will ask you to do is everyone at one person per table, raise your hand if you agree to be the scribe. Okay, nobody's raised their hand. Okay, thank you. I know some of your names, so I can call you out. All right, scribe. Okay, great. So please take notes because we will take them and they will be incorporated into the work that we will be doing as we move forward over the next several months. All right. Okay, how's everyone doing? Anyone have something they'd like to share that came up at their table?
Early childhood educators right now who are sometimes feeding their families with SNAP benefits, right? And so how are we going to move from that in early childhood education to where early childhood educators have access to family-friendly policies too? So that was then, I hope.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Rebecca?
That's right. I should be a mic runner. So I'm Rebecca Quinn-Wolf with PNC. We had a good dialogue. One of the questions we're asking is, in all of these family-friendly benefits that companies, whether you're small, mid-size, large corporation like PNC, we have 55,000 employees, where we have some family-friendly benefits, is what about the hourly wage worker, manufacturing, blue collar, those tend to be the historically unfriendly family, benefit practices. So how do we tackle that? Because it's hard for it all to be a one-size-fits-all. They just don't have that access, that flexibility. They're either dock pay or lose their job, so I don't know how we address, the requiring a minimum wage, salary, living wage would be an important piece to that puzzle. I don't know how that's addressed.
Thank you so much for raising that question, because that's something we've all been talking about as well as part of Family Forward NC, and some of the questions we want to ask as we're going across the state, so that we can learn more about what is it that can be done and what kind of supports would be needed for businesses to be able to offer that to all employees, hourly as well as salary. So thank you. I think that's a really important conversation that has to be had. We can have one more. One more person share? I'm sure you can find someone, Lisa. Anyone else? Oh, there's one over here, Lisa, if they're reluctant. If you have reluctant folks over there.
All right. Well, I think the key was the flexibility. I mean, and that was what everyone up there was talking about. But when you're talking about the living wage and many of us in this room are Smart Start folks and child care folks, and our folks out there don't have benefits. So how do we get to that point? Because that does help us retain people.
Yes.
As opposed to they move every 6 months and, or a year or whatever. How are we going to build that retention and build that so that it's a living wage? And it really cuts across the whole issue with poverty of it as well. It's one thing to have 55 employees and be able to offer benefits and absolutely flexible, or that we don't just have sick leave versus vacation, that it's leave. Right. You use it how you want, and actually encouraging people to actually take their time off. When he said that, I'm sort of going, yes, because this is hard work.
This is hard work. Thank you. For
and
acknowledging.
Whatever work anybody in this room is doing is hard work, or you wouldn't be here listening to this.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And these are some of the questions, again, that we want to be posing as we go across the state and talk with folks and have these kinds of conversations. If we don't ask the questions, we'll never get to the place where we're making progress here. And so it's really important that we do that, which leads us into, let's get started. Let's do this together, take on this challenge, and we need you to help us. So everybody has at their table a card that looks like that, an action card. And tell us how you can be engaged in Family Forward NC, whether that's starting by being kept up to date, partnering with us to host a business-focused conversation in your community, participating in a conversation yourself to help inform the guide, or sharing your organization's policies with us so that we can lift them up and let others know that there are things that can be done. We know a range of businesses, of sizes, that is, a range of sizes are doing different things, and that there's a huge range, as you can see in the brochure, of things that people can do as a starting point. So if you'll take a moment and fill out that card before you go and leave it on the table, we would greatly appreciate that. And again, I want to thank you so much for choosing to spend your after lunch time with us. I know this is the time where we all need a little sugar, so if you haven't hit the Smarties and you want to be a Smartie, please take one. And we look forward to working with you.